Yep, we're live. All right, this hangout is live. This is great, actually. Nice to see that hangout live is actually back up and running for me because after 3 weeks, I was starting to get a little bit worried, a little bit concerned about this. But today, folks, so for those of you who are joining us, and sorry, actually, I got to get rid of this other video I got playing in the background here. I'll be listening to that. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to hear myself talking with a delay. That sounds really messed up. But yeah, for those of you who are joining the stream, sorry, actually, me and Victor, we're going to do this in a Skype conversation because as those of you who pay attention to my channel, yeah, we haven't had any problems in the last few weeks as far as trying to do these live Google Hangouts. It just, there were some technical issues. And in the site, that tells you when sites are down, it was telling me it was down a few weeks ago, but subsequent to then things were supposed to be okay, but we were still having issues. But anyways, today we were going to do the Skype conversation. That didn't work out right because the only way I could do it was recording in just audio only. And I like to keep things with full audio and video. So we said, hey, let's give Google Live just one more try. And we did. And hey, bada bing, bada boom. Today it's working. So we're going to be doing this live. For those of you who don't get to see this live, well, obviously you'll be able to watch it as soon as it's uploaded. I'm going to pass it off to Victor here so that he can explain, because basically what the discussion is going to be today in the debate is, does God exist? Victor's going to be taking the atheist position, and I'm going to be taking the position that God does exist. And Victor's going to help explain what it means from his side of it, because that's a thing. If you're going to have a kind of dialogue or debate with someone, the most important thing you can do is at least get down to the fundamentals of explaining what your position actually means. What's it mean to be an atheist? And Victor's going to help explain that now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, basically, atheism is really enshrouded in so many misconceptions. It's just absolutely astounding. For the last 35 years, I've been hearing the same mistakes and errors, intellectual errors in regards to a proper understanding and definition of it. And critics often accuse atheists of dogmatism, for positively denying the existence of God, going so far as to say that atheism is a religion. So this is a misrepresentation of atheism that needs to be addressed from the outset, and then we can definitely have a good conversation, proceeding from that understanding. And atheism is often approached with fear and mistrust, as if one were coming across a doctrine that advocates a wide assortment of evils, from nihilism, immorality, and communism. Communism is like the big one, So they're all straw man attacks, sometimes innocently made, sometimes not. But basically, atheism has become, so enshrouded with misconceptions and falsehoods, and religious critics prefer to attack unpopular ideas associated with atheism. Let me give you an example of that, Bennett. Like most especially communism, as I touched upon. These religious critics, they're content to identify atheism with specific personalities in history, such as Karl Marx. He was an atheist, and Nietzsche. He's famous for the saying "God is dead." And by criticizing the view of these individuals, these religionists congratulate themselves for destroying atheism under the broad sweep. They'll tear apart communism, they'll cite like the historical disaster that it's been, and they actually congratulate themselves for sweeping onto the trash heap of history atheism as well, because they were atheists. But communism is a positive proposition. It has intellectual content. It's not in the same category of atheist, because atheist just means, the prefix a just means without or non-theism. Anything is compatible with theism, because the only thing that's incompatible with atheism is theism. So you can, once you clear the sweep away, you clear the field, you completely clear the cognitive field before you. You can have an atheist could be a capitalist, an atheist could be an ethical subjectivist, an atheist could be an ethical subject or objectivist rather. The atheist could be a pessimist. The atheist could be somebody's a positive disposition. It goes on and on and on. So communism and the like, they're distinct from the subject of atheism. Like just to finally make the clarification, it's not just me asserting that. Okay, I'm just not coming up this from my ass. The word atheist is thoroughly and unambiguous and straightforward. Etymologically, as well as philosophically, an atheist is without belief in God. That's all the A before a theist means. That's it. So it describes the absence of a belief. It does not itself purport any kind of worldview. Atheism qua atheism is not the purporting of any kind of worldview. It just means absence of theism. That's it.
Yep. And actually, I'm perfectly willing to accept that. And even if you're out there watching this video now, if you just even go to Google and type in atheism, the description you get, there's multiple dictionaries in the past, but I'm even completely aligned, and Victor, I'm sure, is as well, is aligned with the description even used in the modern iteration in the online dictionary here, which describes disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. And that's basically what Victor's saying. It's not to put forth anything any more than it's just that you don't believe in God or gods.
Yeah, and really to put a crystal clarity on this issue, one final statement in regards to definitions. And I do agree with Ayn Rand in this regard, that definitions are the guardians of rationality. So let's go a whole hog on this. There could be two categories of atheism, if you want to put it that way. One, implicit and explicit. And implicit atheism means the absence of theistic belief without conscious rejection of it. Let's say you come across a human being who's never conceived of the subject, has never even heard of such a thing, right? Human beings are not born with an innate knowledge of the supernatural or God and all of the edifices of church doctrine and whatnot. I mean, we're not born with innate knowledge of that. So there's nothing to deny. You can't even suspend your judgment. Here comes the agnostics, right? It just means the absence. So it's not necessarily a cautious, philosophical, principled objection, to theism. A newborn infant is a non-theist. So there you go. Yeah.
Okay. So now that Victor has explained what an atheist is, and we've both agreed to that is the defined meaning, and that's where we're going to be basing our conversation in regards to, was at least on Victor's side, is a non-belief in God. Now, for me, because I'm going to be taking the position of that I do believe there's such thing as a God, we got to get to that defined meaning as well. And I'm completely conducive with even the modern iteration and description that they use for that as well. Let me just make this a little bigger here. It's hard to see this. Okay. So God, if you look it up in the dictionary as well, in Christianity and other monotheistic religions, the creator and the ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority, the supreme being. So that's the first aspect of the description. So it's the belief in a creator. And basically, so we're going to be covering two very important aspects of this. So it's the metaphysical aspect, or even you can even use this metaphysical in some regard, but at the same time, and we'll get down into this too, it's also in alignment to the fact that, so it's the creator, right? So I'll get more deep into the fact that I believe in a creator.
Oh, I'm all ears, man. Like I want to have to see what you have to say, rather. Excuse me.
Right, and then there's the secondary aspect of it that me and Victor will be getting to as well, which is what they're suggesting even in this modern description, which is of a moral authority. So that's something that's an abstract as far as, not in terms of how we come to be, or how the earth or how the planets, or how it's a construct of how we derive or perceive what something as it pertains to a moral authority. So that's a completely different concept in relation to what the creator. We're going to be dealing with the observation of whether there's such thing as a creator first, and then we can get into the moral aspects of God or atheism subsequent to that, and like I say, I'm very much influenced myself and have a profound knowledge and understanding of Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism, and then combine that with people such as Stefan Molyneux with UPB. But we're definitely going to be dealing with the moral aspect. But first, we just want to deal with the most important part of what you're talking about, an atheist or God, which is, well, an atheist doesn't believe in God. And me as a proponent of God, I believe there is such thing as a God. And like I say, what I'm talking about, what I'm going to be describing today is such thing as a creator, right? Not that's the thing. A lot of people hear the term God and they think instinctively about whether they went some Protestant, Presbyterian, Catholic, or whatever church, right? Whatever denomination they chose to go to as a child or somewhere, as far as their religious upbringing or teachings, is they try to break that down into creating something that I think is actually a little bit more misconstrued and not truly representative of what God, for me anyways, for me, like I say, everyone has their own opinion, but for me, what God, as far as this first aspect of this conversation or this debate entails, is there such thing as a creator? How did the entire universe come to be? Now, like I say, I'll hand it off to Victor and he can give his brief description or his information, and take as long, actually it doesn't have to be brief, take as long as you need, Victor, to say whatever you get to say, and then I'll respond.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, basically, since we've moved along from atheism, let's move along to the definition and idea of God. I think that, like, whatever your conception or understanding or appreciation in accepting this concept is not so out of the ordinary that it's not common to a lot of people, right? So it's not necessarily going to be very what's the word that I want? Idiosyncratic, right? Okay. So I think that it's important that you first explain what you mean by the word God. Absolutely. When the theist is attempting to establish the existence of God, we first have to ask the question, what is God? And a follow-up question, what is the nature of God? How are we to identify him? I even have problems with that. I've assigned a gender to it, right? So what is God? How do we identify it? Let's put it that way. At least some of the attributes of this supposed creature must be known before anything can be considered relevant to establishing its existence. We have to have some idea. Consider, like, and I thought about this. So you might like this, Bennett. Like, here's like a little dialogue I got to imagine between myself, like and you. And I'll quote you, Mr. Hunter, a Blarco exists. Mr. Pross, prove it. Mr. Hunter, it has rained for 3 consecutive days. There, that's my proof. Now, I said Blarco, right? Now, Mr. Pross's demand for proof is premature. Mr. Hunter has not specified what Blarco is. Until and unless he does so, Blarco is nothing but a meaningless sound. And Mr. Hunter is uttering nonsense, respectively. So without some description of a Blarco, and the alleged proof of his existence becomes rather incoherent. So nothing can qualify as evidence for the existence of God unless we have some idea of what we're searching for. Even if defining the concept, I think, of God is not like some optional chore to be undertaken at the theist convenience. It's crucial to any intelligent conversation. Like, for example, the theist has the responsibility, I think, of explaining the content of his belief, not the atheist. If the theist fails to do so, the statement that God exists is to communicate nothing, really. So let's take a look at some of the popular notions of God. What is meant by the word. There have been many historical concepts of God, from the anthropomorphic deities of the Greeks to the omnipresent God of Christianity. These are very different gods, right? So it's not just something you just can't, jump into the heat of a debate without having some, what does the other person mean by that word? Some gods are the objects of reference, while others are not. Self-proclaimed theists will, have to decide among themselves, what if anything they have in common when they profess to believe in God. But when I use the term God, when I claim to be an atheist, though, I will use the term God generally to designate any supernatural or transcendent being, and this being the most popular usage.
Hey, Victor,
Yeah.
sorry to catch you in midstream there, man, but
Yeah.
on your thing, your camera has it so that you're only half of your face is in the camera there, buddy.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
No worries. Yeah, that's better. Sorry for getting you there in the middle of your thought, but you were half into the screen there. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. No worries about that. Yeah. So when I use the term God, this is generally to designate a supernatural or transcendent being, not the anthropomorphic gods of the Greeks. That's not what the theists and the atheists are arguing over, right? You would agree with that, right? So, and then I mean, I've engaged in these kind of debates over the years, and I'll be sitting there with my atheist position, making all the arguments, and then sometimes I've discovered midstream in the debate that they were pantheists, and the pantheism that's just identified as as nature and her rule, and pantheism is the identification of God with nature, but the pantheist or the alleged theist who wishes to describe his God solely in naturalistic terms is opened up to the charge of reducing his God to triviality, if anything, and it's also a very generous concession to the atheist position, because if you don't want to argue for the transcendent supernatural being, that is the actual debate between the theist and the atheist, not pantheism, not the anthropomorphic gods of ancient Greece. So according to the theism, God is necessarily transcendent and supernatural. He is the source of the natural world. And I think that probably puts everything into a good perspective where I think you might be coming from. We established that you're not a pantheist. You're just not talking about nature. Your supernatural means above and beyond nature. So that thing that's above and beyond nature is the author and the source of the natural universe.
Agreed.
That's the popular conception of God.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Actually, yeah, because that's actually the one part where, because like as with you, Victor, I'm very much of the objective, scientific, logical construct as far as how I want to identify and understand the world that I surround me. I don't want to think in fictional or metaphysical constructs or even based on the forms of mysticism that so many people in the past have used, for very nefarious reasons, as we all understand. Because once you've created the human psychology to believe in some subjective authority, right, whether it's on the ground in the real world or in some other universe or an external realm, that can be quite detrimental to people. So what I want to talk about today, predominantly from my side, as far as the creator aspect of it, is because I, born and raised in modern teaching institutions in Canada and Western world, post-Enlightenment era, is we're taught, the evolutionary, the theory of evolution, which actually completely makes a lot of sense if you're someone that, like I said, has a scientific or objective mind. You can understand that, a lot of the theories of evolution does explain a lot of the objective world that we actually recognize around us. And a lot of these objective observations and retestable hypotheses that scientific endeavors have undertaken and taught us, they're provable. They're not just like baseless hypotheses. These are actually proven and grounded in scientific thought and endeavors, because we can send, spaceships to the moon and back, and by using the math and understand how gravity and breakaway forces as far as leaving the atmosphere. We have the grasp of the scientific mind, of the understanding of how these things work. And you can take that all the way back to I believe they believe at this point in time, it's about 14 billion years that the entire universe, and it's been constantly been expanding, right? And now you can get into the areas, whether it's increasing in speed or slowing in speed. That's stuff we're not going to be dealing with today. But basically, if you understand the theory of evolution all the way back to the Big Bang, I actually believe most of that stuff as far as the hypothesis or the theory, because they seem to be grounded in a lot of scientific fact. And I would never reject scientific scientific fact just for the feels, right? I have to ground my understanding in something that's not just someone tells me, but it's a testable hypothesis that can prove for me, right? So gravity works because I don't need someone else to tell me that gravity is real. I can test the hypothesis of how gravity reacts by, taking a rock and dropping it. So I am very much entrenched in the observations and the understanding of scientific and objective thought and logical consistency that stays there and has built basically the modern world we live in. The problem is we got to, and I've always had this even as a child, is science explains all the way back. And I used to do this with my grandmother when she used to teach me a lot of the stuff from the Bible, or even the teachers in school. So I used to drive a lot of people. I used to drive religious people and atheists crazy, constantly question their stuff, all because, like I say, it makes total sense until you go back to that moment of inception, that moment of creation. Because that, if you take that, like the theory of evolution or even the theory of the creator, both of those theories take you back to that very first starting point, right? So science gives you an explanation that's called the Big Bang. And most of you people that have gone through a thorough education in Western societies, you understand what the Big Bang is. And it's basically that there was nothing. And then there was just this massive explosion, and time and space is created, and it's been constantly expanding. Like, of course, I'm breaking it down real quickly because I'm not going to try and get into just the full scientific aspect, because that would waste a whole lot of time. But we both understand how
that would be a separate discussion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we both understand that, at least from the scientific theory, and that's why they still, to this day, they still call it a theory, right? It's not called the evolutionary principle. It's called the evolutionary theory. And the reason why is because everything that they've explained so far, and that's the beautiful thing I love about the scientific people, or the scientific mind, people that have a scientific mind, or even atheists, is they're always constantly willing to question this stuff until there's something provable, like Victor was alluding to earlier. Don't ask me to prove something that's not real. You got to prove that there is something. So like me taking the position of God, it's not, the onus is not on Victor to prove there's a God, because he can't prove there isn't a God. Like if it's something I just create in my mind, how can he prove that, right? He can't. So I would never try to hold Victor to that kind of ridiculous standard anyways. But because even evolutionary,
you're not required to prove a negative.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's the same goes. The same goes for any other department of life. If let's say that your son's wallet is missing and you accuse me of it, and then I'm saddled with the responsibility of proving that I didn't. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. No, I agree 100%. So like I say, so we're completely on board as far as post the Big Bang Theory. A lot of scientific equations and observable realities and objective reality can prove that those things that are based and grounded on scientific theory, they are observably true and conclusively true if you want to test those hypotheses and theories yourself. But like I said, there's still no explanation. How did this magic Big Bang? Now, this is the other part where I always found funny when I would talk to people, like I say, atheists or either or, is God basically says that, like, if you read the verses within the Bible, and like I say, these are human beings that wrote them, right? It's not the hand of God. These are human beings, fallible human beings, like the rest of us, that wrote these things. So they were misconstrued and misinterpreted, no doubt, many times throughout the course of history. But there's still, at least there is still some ground understanding that there was basically nothing. And then, I don't know, some people like to put forth some dude on a big pillow of white clouds with long hair, kind of hippie-ish dude or something, right? Well, no, actually, that would probably be Jesus. But either way, someone just did this magic thing and created the world. Now, to me, if you want to think about that as God, as just, like I say, a guy sitting on some metaphorical pillow of clouds, totally, to me, that doesn't mean a whole lot. That's where you say, that's where you're breaking it down into religion. To me, the God is, it could also be representative. And if you heard some even people that are very much atheist and scientific, of the scientific mind, and actually a lot of these people that are now the millennials that are thinking way outside the box in terms of things like the Matrix, right? We've all watched the movie Matrix. Well, the person, or let's say a group or entity or anyone that created this brain in a bucket, right? We're all just, let's even say people that use those concepts, that we're all just laying in these we're just brains in a bucket, or we're just bodies and they're using our brains and they trick how we live in the real world. Well, even if it was some alien life form, right? Let's, like I said, don't think I'm conspiratorial here, folks. It's not that I'm saying that this is real. I'm just saying that there is no genuine explanation how the entire universe come to exist. We understand post the Big Bang and all that happened as a consequence and a result of that. But how did the Big Bang happen? What was the originator? What caused the Big Bang to happen? Now, that's the area where, like I say, where there is still a very real construct for even the atheist mind or the scientific mind, or even people that want to delve into mysticism or the metaphysic realm. That is still very much open to interpretation, and no one has been able to prove one way or the other that there hasn't been something, some external creator per se. Now, just because we humans, you know, whether it's thousands, tens of thousands, millions, or billion years later, well, humans haven't been on the earth that long, but even millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, just because we're still trying to figure out how that happened doesn't mean that it's absent of the fact that that is a potential. So I'll use a perfect example is, like Victor says, you can't prove a negative, which is 100% true. But let's say even 10,000 years ago, you probably could make a pretty good argument, and you probably would have won pretty much every debate if you said there's no such thing as a nebula or a galaxy or even the universe per se, because you could never see that observable, and there would nobody that used any, you know, objective realities that was based or built upon even their current understanding or intellect at the time that could say, yeah, it's right there. It took modern instruments and modern advancements in human intellect and our technologies to even start to understand some of these concepts in the past that very much would have been proven to be completely fictional in construct. So it'd be like saying that the God exists, but you could have been saying a nebula exists. So not that Victor has to prove that a nebula exists per se, without evidence to prove that nobody can definitely. But it doesn't mean that that is conclusive proof that nebulas don't exist. Just like because humans at this particular junction in time haven't proven or figured out a way to understand how we even come to exist, how the universe even come to exist, how the Big Bang even happened, you still can at least leave. This is the area where to me, it's like you can still leave open there and still have the objective and scientific mind and be an atheist and still believe that, no, there's still very much some realm, some possibility that there is a creator.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying. Yeah. The well, just to follow up on that, if you have anything additional to say, I can follow up.
No, go ahead, Victor. Because like I say, I got other things, but you go ahead and respond to that. Because I don't want to. That's the thing. I don't want to go too. I want everyone to kind of listen back and forth to what we both have to say, so that they don't get. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Well, just to illustrate the importance of the supernatural or transcendental element in theism, because you've been talking a lot about, like, you know, the what science has come to discover, which we didn't know before. So why don't we leave some wiggle room for God? I think, if I appreciate like the tenor of what you're trying to say.
Yep.
Let me stress the supernatural, the transcendental element in theism. Consider the following hypothetical situation. In another solar system, we discover an alien life form, whereas right now it's just like, maybe it's just some tinfoil kooks who might be, you know, talking about like this. But let's say we discover an alien form of life, as a matter of fact, right? A form which is superior to man in all respects. These advanced creatures have an immense lifespan, superior strength, agility, mobility, superior capacity for memory and abstract thought, just superior right across the board. Now, does it follow, in virtue of these superior capacities, that these creatures should be designated as gods? No, because despite the superiority of these creatures in relation to human beings, they are nevertheless bound by natural laws of the universe. They are subject to the same physical, logical laws as human beings. They have limitations. And so if we choose to call these beings gods, let's say, this would mean that they are creatures who are superior to another creature, thereby becomes a god to even less superior beings than us. And on down to, like, for example, a dog would be a god with respect to a plant. A man would be a god with respect to lower life forms. A genius would be a god in relation to a man of average intelligence, who would be himself a god to a man who was a moron. So in short, the difference between a god and natural existence must be a difference of kind, not merely degree, of kind. So theists who don't want to wish to imply that a supernatural being resides physically, that's not what they're saying. Somewhere in this God is not living in physically somewhere in space beyond, the universe. Rather, theists wish to convey the idea of a being that exists beyond the framework of natural law. And it is, as we've established, of course, is popular theism is the creator and the author of the natural universe. But we're still left with the problem of, like, what is this thing? What is it? The term supernatural has metaphysical connotations because it emphasizes the nature of God in relation to the rest of existence. Super, in this context, means above or beyond the natural universe. So a supernatural being is one that exists in some sense beyond the realm of the natural universe. And this is what I've always had problems with, Bennett.
Well, yeah.
So you can leave wiggle room for aliens,
Yeah, well, the problem, of course, Victor, though, is when you get into discussing God, which is why I'm going by the actual description rather than people's subjective opinion regarding to what God means. And like I say, I'm going to completely stick within the confines of the actual description of what God means. So not like it broken down into religious concepts or constructs, because we will all 100% recognize and acknowledge. Same with government, right? That's another fictional construct. We can get into that. As an atheist, he knows this as well. Or as an anarchist, sorry, Victor knows this as well. But the construct that you're talking or referencing are things that human beings created or conjured up as a means, I believe, fully to use to control the population, just with governments, to create some, metaphysical realm where there's some authority that's going to, harm you in some way as a means to control the population. Now that can be used for benefit and it can be used for detriment, as with most things in life, just like any instrument or any construct.
Oh yeah, no, I'm aware that the concept has been used in very manipulative forms,
right. But I'm just talking about when we're talking about God today, because like I say, I'm going by the definition of just a creator. I'm not trying to get into what other human beings have conjured up in their own way, because trust me, as someone that come from a religious family, I know how humans can make up whatever the hell they want that to mean, right? And like I say, if it's not grounded or based on anything that's not just objective, but the hypothesis or any moral hypothesis, which I guess if you want to get away from the creator, that's why I'm still trying to stick here, because I think eventually, and this is where this conversation is going to end up in, is the flip side of why I believe in God as an authority is the flip side of, so God to me is a creator, right? The creator. So like I say, there's no way of proving how the universe or humans or everything that surrounds us was created. So that's still a hypothesis, a testable hypothesis that does leave that realm, as I was alluding to earlier, as far as God as the creator. But then there's also the pretenses you're alluding to as far as humans have to derive and form some kind of universal morality or ethics. And to me, that is just a reality. That's how we cohabitate and coexist. That's how we're going to be able to do it peacefully anyways, unless we just want to live in the state of nature. And if you just want to live in the state of nature, we'll just go ahead and put your binoculars on, head on over to Africa or anywhere out there where nature exists, and you'll see that there's no morality in nature, right? Observable nature. Predominantly, there's some things where you can say, well, that kind of skirts around the edges there. But if an animal's hungry, there's no second guessing as far as, oh, that poor little deer. Like if a wolf's hungry and there's a deer, you're not thinking, geez, did that deer have kids? Oh, I don't want to kill that deer. He might have kids. And no, it's the natural instincts to thrive and survive is going to take over that point in time. So what separates human beings from nature is literally our morality and ethics. And that is a construct. That is something that we humans have built up over centuries, over millennia at this point in time. And that is some area where, once again, I still believe that God, as far as, so do you want to get into that yet there, Victor? Or like as far as,
yeah. Well, no, let's having like, are you talking about like ethics? Is where do we derive our moral sense?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. But did you want to even move into that yet? Because like if you're
not yet.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, and the reason why, Bennett, is because we first have to establish the problems that I have with the supernatural. You know, okay, because we haven't established what this being is and how anything can exist as a supernatural being. Let me just flesh out a little bit further why this is problematic to me, if I haven't made myself clear yet.
Okay.
As I've established, the supernatural is above and beyond the restrictions imposed by natural law. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the generic idea of God. This is the definition I've heard my entire life. This exemption from natural law has profound implications for human knowledge. A God is epistemologically transcendent. That is, that it falls beyond the scope of man's intellectual comprehension, because we don't comprehend God in the same sense that we comprehend gravity or anything else within the natural universe. So the full nature of God is not merely unknown, it's unknowable, I would say, because of that. And God, by definition, is that which cannot be understood. So a God is a supernatural being, which implies metaphysically that a God is not subject to the natural laws of the universe, and epistemologically that a God therefore transcends human knowledge, human understanding. Because of that, the metaphysics bridging with the epistemology. These are the basic beliefs of theism, a belief in the supernatural and a belief in the inherently unknowable. What is God? That's the problem that I have. The first problem with the designation of the supernatural, or any equivalent of it, is it tells us nothing about a positive about God. Supernatural does not tell us what God is. It tells us what God is not, that he's not a part of the natural universe. But it does not tell us what God is. Now, existence is the crux of our discussion today. To be is to be something. That's what existence means. A thing is what it is. What identifiable characteristics does a God possess? In other words, how will we recognize a God if we stumble across one? Yeah, so to state that a God is supernatural does not provide us with an answer. You just put super on the word natural, and it tells us nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, but that's the thing. When you say natural, even when you're talking about law, I would prefer to use common law rather than natural, because natural law actually isn't natural, because once again, you'd have to get through back to the description, but that would mean it exists in nature, right? Natural is what that would mean in its proper definition.
I don't mean to imply any ethical implications of just of yet. When I speak of natural law, I'm just talking about like the regularity in nature, the seasons succeeding one another, the plants revolving, and so forth, and just how the universe is operating, which we can get into, you know, the argument from design and the first cause, you know, what's the cause of the universe and things like that. But that's all I mean by the natural law. God is exempt from that. He's the author of it, it's all said. And we can study the natural universe and have a knowledge of it and how things operate. But to juxtapose and to superimpose a God onto that as an explanation, as the author of all of that, now I'm stepping back and saying, okay, but well, what is this creature God?
Okay, okay. Let me deal with that then. So, like you're suggesting and alluding to, and I think everyone would accept that there is something that separates we human beings from the rest of the state of nature. Because if, like I say, if we watch observable nature in its natural habitat, there isn't any construct of morality. That's literally what separates us. Even when you're talking about laws of any form, is other than like scientific laws, like laws of the observable universe, which is gravity and math and all those things. Exactly. But when you're talking about as far as humans, is what separates we humans from the rest of the animals kingdom or the rest of species, or basically as far as what we know anyways, as far as the observable universe, we can all be proven wrong in all of our hypotheses when aliens start landing. But for now, for what we humans know, as far as our understanding of the observable universe, there is something very different between the human species and every other species on this planet.
Capacity to reason.
So to me, I can correlate that with a creator, because why, even though I definitely give credit to the human race, like pat us all on the back for using this amazing brain that we've been given to give these constructs where we think outside the box of just, fight or flight, or or might makes right, which is basically what the natural tendencies of evolutionary or biologic tendencies are, is just whatever you can do, right, to propagate your species or to thrive or survive. That's what the natural laws of nature is. It doesn't matter how many other plant species or animals that have to be destroyed, as long as this particular species thrives and survives, well, I mean, within a certain restriction, because even though a plant would want to survive, it doesn't want to destroy the soil, because a plant, if it destroys the soil, well, it won't be able to continue to thrive and survive. So there are always balancing factors within nature that, once again, shows even that alone, even without using humans as the observable upper echelon of what it means to be a human being or a species alive. Even if you just watch nature, it seems that there's some intelligent design there, because even under the confines of just evolutionary theory, or just doing what's beneficial in the immediate here and now, for long term or medium term, even the animal species or plant species do things that are more conducive, not just to flourishing for today, but for flourishing for long periods or long stretches. So there seems to be some intelligent design, and the fact that, if you want to get into science, the breakdown of DNA, how much we actually share as far as our composition or our genetic makeup, in comparison to even like a plant species or other animal species that are much lower on the evolutionary scale in comparison or in contrast to human beings. So that does show, to me at least, it shows there's some kind of intelligent design, even just in the physical realm. But once again, because we humans have this concept and we can think, well, we perceive our own deaths, right? Why were we even given this? Well, to me, it's weird to think about it from just a biological or an evolutionary construct. Is why would any what would be the benefit evolutionary biologically for us to have this theoretical or mind that's built and entrenched that we can understand philosophical teachings, right? It wouldn't be conducive to just propagate the species. Like, based on pure evolution or biology, we don't need any of that extra stuff to propagate the species. And nature has shown that works perfectly well, right? It works perfectly fine to propagate the species, whether you want to do it in the R versus K, like, just spread it, right? Right? Like, some species just propagate by screwing anything they can, and others do it in different manners. But it does seem there is some intelligent design for all animal species. But for humans to be able to put ourselves in some kind of paradigm where we want to step outside of just evolutionary or biological functions or natural tendencies and put us something that escapes that, and the fact that we're even having this conversation today tells you that, well, who planted this stuff in people's minds? And it wasn't just me. Like, even people, if you go back tens of thousands of years, why the hell is it everywhere you go around the world, there's people that believe in some metaphysical realm or a god or a creator? Well, it tells you that there's at least something instinctual right down to our biological core that keeps causing humans to question, is it just a natural tendency? Is it just by evolution? Is it just by biology? Or is there something else that's greater than us that has given all these amazing capacities and abilities, intellectually, physically, or in any other way, to be something that's completely separate from nature? And nothing else in nature has even come close to doing what humans have been able to do. So how did we get to that point? Something has done. So something has put us in this area where we can think critically about these things and actually have arguments or conversations or debates as it pertains to how we even come to exist. I guarantee you're not seeing much of this happen in the rest of the animal kingdom, right?
No, the animal kingdoms, they just screw and whatever they find, and no romance, no chocolate, and flowers. Okay, I know, I appreciate what you're saying. So basically what you're saying is that because human beings certainly have the capacity for evil, at the same time we have the capacity for ethics and compassion and love, and and civilization and progress and prosperity and creativity and civility and humanity, that this is evidence, at least in an indirect way, of the divine spark, I guess, is what you're suggesting then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. The well, that's all well and good. Like I'm willing to accept it entirely naturalistic terms, that as the terms of evolution is spatted out that way. But and I think at the same time, you're also talking about like what's very compelling arguments, and I found them to be very compelling at one time too. Would be the first cause argument and the argument from design. You know, like what explains the universe, and what could possibly explain the amazing regularity in nature. Like, it's kind of like saying, like, you know, when the atheist is challenged, you know, like, so you mean to tell me that, like, if you took some dynamite to a print factory, and you blew it up, and everything was just flying up into the air, and then and then all of a sudden, like, all comes raining down are hundreds of thousands of copies of Atlas Shrugged, where all the words and the formatting of the novel just came about by chance in this explosion, right? You know, it's like, no, it was all engineered, and it was designed, it was written by and it went to the publisher, and then, but it was all designed. It was all designed, you know. So, and I can appreciate that, and I found these arguments like very compelling, you know, like at one time. So we do have the question: if God doesn't exist, what caused the universe? Or if you don't believe in God, how can you account for the magnificent design in nature? Is basically the argument. So if we first have to admit that the universe requires, if we first admit that the universe requires a causal explanation, or that the universe exhibits design, then the inference, I think, sure, is that a master designer follows automatically. But these are not the issues of the debate between theists and atheists. The question is not what is the cause of the universe. Rather, we have to ask, does the universe require a causal explanation in the first place? Now, how come nobody ever asks that question? Now, similarly, the question is not what is responsible for the design in nature. Rather, we must first ask, does nature in fact exhibit design? Okay, so the first cause argument is perhaps the most popular of the causological arguments. I can take that first, unless you want to respond to what I've said so far.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the causal, I mean, like I say, just look at the observable universe, and the fact that, like I say, everything within the state of nature, humans included, has to function within a lot of parameters, both physical and metaphysical in nature, as far as how we're going to, exist, coexist, and propagate our species. And in the physical realm, that just means you got to feed yourself, right? You got to make sure you have water. There's lots of things that we can see that's observable in the physical realm. But like I say, even the animal species that once again, I believe, if there's such thing as a creator, wasn't that it was just solely as meant for human beings alone, because, well, then we would just, to me, it's like, what the hell would we need if there's a magical concept as far as the creator, as far as only cared about creating human species? Well, no, that would be, I think, a detriment to even the human experience. So the fact that we have to function even in the world and deal with in the state of nature, and we all have that genuine concept and understanding of what it is to be a person that has respect of the state of nature, that kind of tells me that it's kind of instinctive within humans that feel that we are part of something that's greater than ourselves. Even people, like I say, even people that are very much completely of the scientific mind. So I pay attention to people like Richard Dawkins. You got Neil deGrasse Tyson. You got now Sam Harris out there that's talking a lot about this stuff. You got a few other people that would be identified as atheists and very much of a scientific mind. Even them, actually, Brett, was it Weinstein? I hate messing up those guys' last name, because, you know, the dude that Harvey something, or I think it's Weinstein is the name for the Brett and the Eric Weinsteins. If I'm getting it wrong, I'm really sorry, because I don't want you to be confused with that Hollywood pervert, right? But anyways, but even a lot of these people that, like I say, have nothing but a pure scientific mind and have no bases or grounds to try to go against everything that they understood, but they still are actually today even trying to leave out, how can we figure out a way to leave everything based on science, but leave this construct, even like I'm suggesting, where there is this this gene, as they call it, that the God gene or whatever you want to call it, because there's a lot of them, like I say, that have had nothing but pure scientific observations and the basis for their education that's grounded on atheism and rejecting the concept of mysticism. And even those people understand that, and Nietzsche even kind of alluded to this back in the day, and this is something that was around before a lot of the modern advancements in technology, right? Is if we destroy the concept, and actually this is kind of where I can't really stay away from it anymore, where that moral equation has to come into the conversation, is there has to be something that's just not just defined based on the fact that we have a creator, as far as understanding how, even if I'm someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson or trying to explain black holes or any, like I say, even a scientific mind, if you reject the concept or even the potential of a creator, well, all your testable hypotheses will not maybe be conducive if you're leaving out just one part of the equation, right? This is even with like things like string theory or a lot of the modern advancements today, is everything has to fit in for it to work. Everything has to fit. So even the scientific mind says we can't leave out the potential that there's a creator, because if we leave out the potential for a creator, even a lot of the hypotheses that we test as far as how things coexist or how it happens today is, if we can't explain it in just pure ground-based observations, well, we have to leave something within our mind that gives us the potential to explain it in other measures or in other means. But once again, it also ties into me, and like I say, I'm going to have to kind of pivot there now, is human beings, and we all understand this. We all have this separation between us and the rest of nature, where morality, right? Morality, and that's, like they say, the secondary a part of this description that is given of God, which is a moral authority. Now, like I say, to me, this is a part where it's really, really hard to take one side of the equation over the other, because I realize that both of them can be used for nefarious reasons. But if I was a betting type person or a gambling type person, or even someone that had to pick one side of the coin or the other, because like I say, I don't know if there's a third side of the coin, right? So far, like I say, the only thing that I have as a basis or a grounding for my understanding as far as the observable universe or the world I live in is, like I say, the atheist or the scientific observable explanation as far as the theory of evolution, right? Which, like I said, still only explains back to a certain point. But the other aspect is the concept as far as our morality. Well, where did we gain this thing where we feel we even have to have morality? Because a lot of times we'll use, I know myself, let me just use myself as a personal example and anecdotal experience. There's been many times where I did something that was moral, right? Beneficial because I did the right thing, but it was actually detrimental to me actually at that particular time, right? So perfect example, walking by and I'm broken $bucks on the sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
Damn it. That I could really use that $50. And trust me, there's been times where I was like, damn, I could really use that $50. But for some reason, there was something inside of me. Why? I don't know. But there was something inside me that said, no, I got to reject, even though that is definitely a benefit to me. And like, if I just used my evolutionary or biological processes, hey, that's benefit me at the expense of others. That's a good thing biologically to benefit myself. That means maybe I'll have more ability to propagate my species or my offspring. But I chose not to. And the reason why that is because I do firmly believe and grasp that it's very important for humans. And this is the only thing I think that's the most important aspect as far as creating the concept of God, not for people to just blindly follow, because I would never expect anyone to blindly follow anything other than universal ethics and morality. But this is where Ayn Rand and UPB completely ties in. This is the problem with all the people in the past. They've made this construct as far as what God represents so dogmatic that they don't leave realms for people like me and Victor to bring this together and actually we can make it work for everybody. Really what we need, right? So Ayn Rand, you could call her philosophy objectivism. You could call that God instead, right? I mean, not to most people today, because they'd be like, no, what other people said what God is, that's bullshit. But like I say, I'm just going by the description, which is a moral authority, right? That's all I'm going by, not what other people said that they believe what God is, but I'm going by what like the actual defined meaning of God is. So as a moral authority, which means it's abstract and above and beyond other human beings from being able to change that or tweak it, right? So just like gravity is a completely construct. Like you can't go out there tomorrow and Go ahead and point to gravity. You can't. Why? Because it's a construct in our mind. It does exist, and we know gravity exists because just grab something, drop it, and you'll see it'll drop to the ground. So it exists in nature, but it's also something we can't observe. It's still a construct that somebody had to derive in their mind and use that to explain things to people. Now, Ayn Rand does it very well with objectivist philosophy. Stefan Molyneux does it pretty good with UPB, but they're still basically pointing out, and the premise and the basis of what they're saying in regards to their understanding of morality is that it has to be abstract and it has to be above and beyond what other human beings, fallible human beings, get to interpret. Just like 2 + 2 is math, right? Math, 2 + 2 is 4. Someone else could tell you that that's different and try to figure out a way to make that work for them. But in reality, for the rest of us to actually deal with, if we want to like count things, for us to be able to do it, whether I do it here in Canada or in the US or in China, well, that has to be universally consistent, right? For it to actually be grounded in anything that's retestable and a hypothesis that you can perform all around the world. Same with the abstract idea of God, which is a construct of moral authority. And as far as I'm concerned, I would rather have an abstract moral authority, which I'd like to say, today we call it God, right? A creator, or just what it is to be. Like I say, Ayn Rand did a good job, and she just didn't call it God. She called it objectivism. Stefan Molyneux did the same basic thing, except instead of pointing to like a magic man in the sky, Stefan Molyneux called his philosophy, his construct, UPB. To me, the best thing that can happen going forward, not just from our discussion, but in a lot of debates that's happening all around the world, is people from the scientific mind and people that still believe in the metaphysical realm to come together and figure out, how are we going to create a universal ethics and morality that's based on human intellect and that's observable, that's retestable consistently all around the world, which, like I say, objectivism and UPB have done that very well, but so did Christianity back in the day. Like, don't hit, don't steal. Those are universal ethics that, like I say, UPB and objectivism did a real great job. Like, to me, like Ayn Rand, she just took a lot of the stuff that people in the religious texts in the past and I think she just did a much better job of explaining. That's all, right? Hey, she just did a much better job of explaining it and giving it in a manner that to people without creating some magical figure sitting on clouds in the sky. But to me, it's still an ideal. What she is presenting forth is still, it's in the metaphysical realm, because ethics, there's nothing tangible, right? They're hypotheses that, like I said, but they can be universalized. But religion understood that too. And the reason why people in the past, they just weren't as good at doing it, and they weren't maybe quite as wise as Ayn Rand was, but they just tried to explain it in a way that was probably conducive for their current times. But it's still someone that's saying that we should have some abstract authority that's higher than just human beings. Like, because the minute you place that in the hands of just human beings, look at lawyers and politicians. They'll take whatever that authority, so whether it's government or the church, right? Whether it's Christian or Islam or Judeo or any of these other religions, the minute you place that authority in the hands of human beings, that's when tyranny, that's the minute tyranny has already started to creep its ugly head. At least when we keep it in the metaphysical realm or in the abstract, nobody has the ability or capacity or power or authority to override those objective standards of morality.
Very interesting argument indeed. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: is like, would you say that the belief in God has helped to tame human passions so that we can afford a civilization, or would you say that the actual existence of this being, which we haven't established anything as of yet by it, is the source of the morality that we have?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Yeah, that's a good question.
Or the objective, you want to put it that way, the actual, because I thought we were going to talk about the existence of God. Does this being exist versus the belief that he exists, therefore has beneficial moral effects upon humanity? Like, what would describe your position better?
Well, that's why I say, because to me, sorry, I just got a clear notification. That's why I mean, because as far as the creator thing, like I say, that's for the people that want to get into the scientific endeavors, how the world come to exist. And that's something that, I mean, for those people, good for them and keep working on that. That's a great thing. But like I say, for us, predominantly, I think the most important thing is for us to have something that's ground and based in some kind of universal ethics. Like I say, I think at the end of the day, how most of us that are even trying to talk about God and religion or government and all is we all have to have something that guides us in the way we treat each other, in our morals and our ethics, right? And to me, sorry, go ahead, Victor.
No, I agree. Of course.
Yeah. So really, that's, to me, that's at the end of the day. And trust me, I'm not even pretending like I've got this figured out. I'm still a work in progress for my whole life. I will be. And even when I take my last breath, I'll probably say, I don't know, but I still, at this current time in my life, like I say, and I understand. And like I say, I have tremendous amount, I think, and this is just me throwing shit out of my ass here, but I think if we all do this right and we put proper intellectual vigor and do this in a manner that's conducive with people that have the scientific mind and people that more function from that metaphysical realm, is I think we can come together. And like I say, there's lots of geniuses out there like the Weinsteins and like I say, Richard Dawkins and people like that, and Sam Harris, that are saying, listen, we just can't throw out the baby with the bathwater until we figured out how to create people that are so conducive with, like I say, I don't have a hard time when I go out and try to say, hey, gravity exists, right? Luckily, that's something that's easily understood and attained for people because they can test it, right, for themselves. It's an easy testable thing. But I think even the construct of God, as far as morality, as far, like I say, as far as how we treat and cohabitate and coexist amongst each other, I still think that's a testable hypothesis that maybe someday will brought into the realm that's still in the abstract, like I say, like objectivism or God. Like I say, we just use different words to describe. It's still a construct. Objectivism is still a philosophical construct as far as how humans should, and so is God. But the difference is there's been a lot of people in the past that have misconstrued and fogged the realm of intellectual thought to the point where they, like I say, they created God as a means that you must succumb to it, bow to it. And when that is used for nefarious or a means to control or be the authority arbitrarily to over millions of people to dictate and control their lives, that's as we've seen, that's terrible. But if we stick to the constructs of what it means, like I say, whether it's just as the creator that created the universe or that we need universal morals and ethics, at some point in time, we have to make it so that it's inescapable and human beings can't change it, which is the scientific endeavor, even though people that have a scientific mind, and actually it's funny because religious people have even pointed out to people like Sam Harris stuff is, no, you're a little bit religious yourself because a lot of the things you say is very much entrenched on a metaphysical realm as well. It's just that you think it's different because yours is based on science. But in reality, it's all built on the same. Morality in particular is, we all figured out a way to universalize it, but who gets to be the one? Now, for us that's alive today in the 20th and 21st century, we can, I guess, point back and say, well, Ayn Rand with objectivism, or like I say, Stefan Molyneux with UBB, or go back 2,500 years to Aristotle, right? We can always, but the minute here's the problem. This is the major problem that I see. The minute we place that authority, so even Aristotle was a human being and an individual mind that come up and conjured a lot of the constructs that helped him to understand the observable world and what he thinks it should be a proper way to understand it. The minute we place that authority in the hands of a human being, well, then somebody's going to come along later, and we know this is always going to happen. Somebody's going to come along later and say, well, no, well, let me interpret what Aristotle said to mean what I said, or let me interpret what Ayn Rand said to mean what I said. So like I say, as long as the ideas, right, which is to me what God is as far as we're talking now, not just the creator, but an ideal. So as far as, to me, what God means as far as morality, it's an ideal. So as long as we keep that ideal, if you don't want to call it God, like I say, maybe some point in time in the future, we'll just call it objective philosophy. And if that's what we call it, I don't care. We can drop the God out of it, right? But at least people will understand that it's in an external realm that we can't just change at our whim or based on the political vote. When we get to the point, like I say, where science has done that so well that we don't need the concept of God, and now It's still in the metaphysical realm and in the abstract, but brought out down to the scientific realm where everybody understands the universality of it. Then, like I say, we can. Nietzsche will actually be able to rest in peace, right? We can get rid of God when we get to the point where all of humanity understands that abstract or that concept of God, as far as it pertains to morality or ethics, is just something that we need to cohabitate and coexist each other. It's a construct we need, just like science. If you want to send a spaceship into space or to orbit the moon, there's a construct we have to come up with, which is mathematics, science, and gravity, right? Once we bring that into the physical realm, and like I say, there's a lot of geniuses that are helping us do that right now, and maybe in 20, 30 years, we'll get to that point. But right now, I just don't want people placing that authority. Like if I have the choice, and not like I want that choice, but unfortunately I have to deal with it. We have a choice. Do I want authority to be human-based, like governments, or an abstract or ideal? You want to call your ideal, don't call it God, just call it objectivism. I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I just don't want human beings, right? I just want the ideas and ideals to take center stage, not human beings and how they interpret it.
Okay, yeah, I think I probably have a greater understanding of where you're coming from this. Okay, so I don't know if you've heard me say on other occasions that philosophy is riddled with false dichotomies. You know, have you ever heard me say that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You know, some examples would be the practical versus the moral, the body versus the mind, the heart versus the brain, and so on and so on. Just absolutely philosophy for the last 2,500 years, since the time of the pre-Socratics, has been riddled with false dichotomies that have plagued the intellectual advancement of humanity. Another false dichotomy that I'm hearing now is that if I understand, you can jump in if I'm getting it all wrong, but from what I understand from what you're saying is that, yeah, you know, for the world of facts and science and things like that, yeah, we have that over here in the scientific world. We know we know that about gravity, and we can all agree on that. That's all can be very verified and universal and tangible, and it can be defined, it can be grasped. It's not something that's concocted from the human imagination. There it is. It's a fact. But when we get into more tenable areas like ethics, then that's where it becomes a little bit more, you know, subjective. So that's kind of removed from science. We're talking about ethics after all. What has that got to do with science? So it shifts over to the religious area. And of course, you hear your whole life that God is introduced as some kind of moral arbiter, as the foundation of civilization, just of having the discussion of right versus wrong, automatically in a lot of people's minds has religious connotations. And but keep in mind, like all the human capacities, you know, if we're talking about love, and creativity and whatnot, you cannot divorce this from the scientific, tangible, physical, empirical world. There is no such thing as a floating abstract called love, separate from the sentient human beings that experience the emotion. And there's something even physically happening when a human being feels whatever emotion, not just love, but anger or whatnot. You can't separate that from the tangible objective universe. Concept formation is something that's probably very important in epistemology when it comes to one of the departments in philosophy. And knowledge is hierarchical. I'll put it that way. You have to start it. Philosophy can basically be put into 4 or 5 categories. And I remember Rand was once asked at some kind of press conference for the release of Atlas Shrugged if she could encapsulate her philosophy while standing on one foot. And what an amazing accomplishment of condensement that was, just having her to answer a question off the cuff. And can you, Miss Rand, can you just give us the digestion, the essence of your philosophy while standing on one foot? And she did. She stood on one foot and she said, metaphysics, objective reality, epistemology, reason, ethics, rational self-interest, politics, laissez-faire capitalism, and then art is the final category. Now you see that these are all hierarchy. Okay, if you take any abstract concept such as ethics or love, even people throw love at me, you know, like it challenged me as an atheist. It's like, so how do you account for love? Can you measure that? Huh? Can you put that in the test tube? You know, all these abstract concepts, and going to the jumping over to ethics and completely removing the base metaphysics, objective reality, not supernatural reality, objective reality, and epistemology, reason. It's all hierarchy. It's all a synthesis. They all has to connect. Once you start concocting a lot of abstract ideas that cannot be brought right down to the physical base of objective reality, then they do become airy-fairy floating abstractions. And I think that that's exactly where this idea of God is drifted off onto, because God is said to exist in his own right. It's ridiculous to talk about your elbow without reference to the goddamn arm, right? There's no floating elbows. There's no floating things called love. But as a floating abstract, God, I think, cannot be tied back down to the metaphysical basis of objective reality. Now, in regards to ethics, though, I know that a lot of people get all feely and gushy, and it's like something divine and spark and things like that. To me, it's just a science. It's just a science. You know, look at human beings, as you've established, Bennett, are quite different from the rest of species roaming the earth. You know, we have this ability for abstraction. We have the ability to reason. We can't live the same way that a fish does swimming around in the ocean. A plant can't live the same way that a fish does. A lion can't live the same way that a chimpanzee does, etc. We live according to our natures, and what distinguishes us from the rest of the creatures on the earth is our ability to abstract. We don't live tooth and claw. That's how the animals live. We don't live like a plant. We can't sit there waiting for some kind of photosynthesis to nourish us or whatever. I'm not a botanist, so you understand what I'm just getting at. It's our capacity to reason, and that's why there's a great deal of emphasis on the non-aggression principle, because that is what enables us to live as human beings, living according to our nature. And that's just a scientific discovery for each and individual that has the intellectual responsibility of discovering that on his own, just in the same sense that he has the responsibility to discover, if he cares to, how to add and subtract, to learn mathematics. Ethics is not something to be obeyed. It's something to be understood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I agree. That's a beautiful thing. And like I say, at the very least, when we're done with this debate, I hope at the very least people will take away the very important fact that you need people that are constantly willing to challenge each other on these kind of things, because that's the one thing that's going to keep our intellectual vigor going forward. But at the very least, like I say, whether it's Victor coming at it from an atheist perspective or myself suggesting that there may be such thing as a creator, and I actually do, like I say, in my core, I will never reject scientific thought or objective observations. Like I say, I'm not a dogmatist, but I do believe that there's some intelligent design in how we got here. And just the sheer fact, this is another thing. And like I say, I'm not trying to one up Victor here, because like I say, we're just trying to figure this stuff out. I mean, the fact that even an atheist and myself, which we're sitting here trying to discuss and talk about why we human beings feel this necessity, right? We feel, even atheist is, or even Victor as an atheist, feels it's important, and we have this inherent desire to hold ourselves to these kind of ethical and moral standards. And that, even all on its own, like I say, it's not conclusive, and I would never suggest as much, because I'm not nearly as presumptuous to think I know it all. But that's kind of at least a little bit of evidence that there's something what separate why do we human beings feel it's so important? Why are we compelled to care about like morality and ethics like as we do? And we do. Even people, like I say, that are raised in non-religious families, atheist families, or people out in the middle of the woods, a lot of them have these inherent characteristics that we usually try to do what's good. Not always. It's not like a blanket statement. Like I say, we're fallible, but the fact that most human beings, even throughout history, even if they worship some weird ass like statue or something, for some reason, people had this concept that there was something greater than themselves, right? And that's something that carries through to even people, like I say, with a scientific or objective mind. So no matter which side of the equation you want to fall on, whether you believe in a creator or the concept of God as far as like a moral authority, or you're like an atheist that just wants to keep holding people that believe in God to account. To me, I don't think we can get to the, I don't think we should ever get to the point, well, at least not anytime soon, where my opinion should be the end all be all or a victor's. This is what intellectual and philosophical dialogue and debate really entails, is we're all human beings on a big, gigantic, planet floating through space 1,000 miles an hour, just trying to figure out why and what's the reason, and how can we best figure out some conceptual methodology where we can treat each other in a universally consistent manner as far as like ethics, morality, and not constantly be looking for some like land-based government or political leader to tell us what that means or what that represents. Like I say, at some point in time, we'll hopefully get to that where it's so universalized that it'll be just a construct like gravity. And like, well, of course gravity exists. Duh.
Yeah, I know. What you're saying is that, like, I get the suggestion that you're saying that something as precious and as ethics, we can't leave that in the hands of fallible human beings. So that's where God comes to the rescue to finally objectify it all, because God said so. I mean, is this what you're coming from? This is what will.
Yeah, but as long as you understand what I mean by God, like I say, because God to me isn't like a magic man in the sky. It's an ideal, right? An ideal. So like the person that, when you hear me say God, if you're hearing me, like I say, reference the New Testament, right? And like that's the thing. That's the problem that a lot of people get when you're talking about these things, is the minute you talk about God, they're thinking of, like I say, what they've read in the New Testament or the King James version or something, like I say, or like I say, there is Islamic
God outside of those sources if they're unreliable.
What's that? Sorry, Victor?
Yeah, I won't constrict myself to those sources. If you want to refer us to some other sources in the search of God, I'm open to that.
Oh yeah, no, well, that's just me. Like I say, I'm not even pretending that to me, like I say, I was raised in a religious family, but I also understood because in my family, like I say, there was Protestants, there was Presbyterians, there was even some Jehovah's Witnesses, for crying out loud. To me, every time I went to like a church that some human being created, and all they really did to me is like, you're just interpreting things. That's all human beings doing, is they interpret for themselves what they believed as their particular construct or ideal. The only ones that I would take seriously today as an adult human being is someone that can prove or test your hypothesis as being universalized. So everything that I learned from the Bible, the only thing that I think that I really take away as far as morality and ethics has to come from something that's abstract. And Ayn Rand, like I say, objectivism isn't, you can't touch objectivism. So that is definitely an abstract ideal, just like UPB is an abstract to me, but it has to be testable. I can test objectivism, because when you say you should treat people the way you'd want to be treated and not use force again, those are easy, just like UPB, right? Those are easy. Or even selfish. That's the other thing that people that were raised in a lot of religious teachings, they think when Ayn Rand talks about being selfish, that they think that they're just someone that's evil or mean. No, selfish, everything you do, even love, as she explained. I love my wife, not because, I feel sorry for her that I gotta give her love because I deem her worthy. No, I love her because she does so much for me, right? Because it brings great happiness to me, like in my psychology and my mentality. For me as a human being, it's a great thing. So it's beneficial. It's not altruistic. This is the problem that a lot of people that have fallen into the religious dogmas, is they think that you just have to constantly think that everything you do is about to sacrifice for someone else. That's not true. And that's some area of, like I say, of Christianity where I think, they went way too far. They went way too far.
When you speak of like a God as resting ethics on something abstract, and you're speaking of God as an ideal, then you are speaking metaphorically then.
Yes, exactly. Well, that is, to me, that is what God represents, because there is, it's like I say in the morality, but I still say that there is intelligent design. So there's still the concept that, like I say, as far as like this, just the observable or objective universe, that there might be some intelligent design, there might be an explanation there. But even taking away the intelligent design, just based on the morality thing of it, it is God or objectivism or UPB. They're all, to me, they're the same thing. Just one person calls it God, right? One person calls it objectivism and the other person calls it UPB. But what they're all really pointing to is this is what it is to have ideal standards in how we treat each other, right? And that, at the end of the day, which is why, to me, it's like, reject a lot of the religious teaching and understand they're stories. That's what they are. They're just stories. A lot of the things that you read in the Bible are not meant to be taken in the physical sense, as far as that's conclusive, objectively provable or true. These are stories. Just like, if you, like, Victor's an artist, right? People that go to watch television or read novels or movies, you know, I mean, you can try to break down everything that happens in the movie, or you can kind of look at it and take away what are they trying to tell you? What are the teachings? What are the observable understandings that you're trying? And to me, that is the metaphysical, that is metaphorical, and that is in the abstract, which, like I said, it still represents an ideal. Nothing tangible that any of us are going to be able to grab onto and say, here you go, look, this is how it looks. It's something that we all have to build and base and ground our understanding of what it is to be a human being today. And until we figured out, like I say, to transition fully into the scientific realm where everyone just understands that, look, it's just universally preferable behavior. It's just objective reality. It's just being objectively and logically consistent in your morality or ethics. I hope someday we'll get to that point, and then maybe we can, like I said, just like Nietzsche, like Nietzsche before, like we can get rid of the concept of God as far as the metaphysical sense of some higher being as far as authority. But I don't think that ever truly gets destroyed. It just means that the fundamental understanding of what God means. We just transition away from this, like I say, the guy sitting on the sky to just a construct, right? Just another scientific endeavor that universalizes our morals and ethics. And I think we will get to that point. But until we get to that point, I still want to keep that out of the hands of fallible human beings.
Okay, yeah, but you know, to speak metaphorically is or allegorically is not to speak to the literal truth of something. Like, for example, like the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of, or Adam and Eve in the what is it, the Eden, Garden of Eden? Yeah.
Yep.
Now that's taken as a parable, as a story. There's some Baptists in the deep south who will take it literally. That's historical fact, like fact, that the human race sprung from two human beings that were just sprung up like geranium plants by the magic wand of God. And the earth is 6,000 years old. Like this is like, as far as they're concerned, cosmological, historical fact. Whereas you have other Christians who just said, no, it's just a parable to explain that once you go away from God, from the dictates of God, and they just use very crude examples that you would use in a story, like, you know, just to give an example, like, you can eat from all the abundance that I provided you over here and everywhere else, and make gardens and things like that. Just don't eat from that tree. Just don't eat from that tree. What did they do? They eat from the tree. This is like, yo, I told you not to do it. So it's just a story to explain a moral, to explain a moral lesson, right? But they don't take it literally as true. Now, this is what I'm trying to find out where you're coming from. Is God just being used as a moral parable for the state of communicating in a very allegorical form, a moral ideal that won't be subject to caprice and manipulation and corruption and misunderstanding or whatnot? Or do you actually believe in a higher being as a matter of fact? Because the name of the discussion is, does God exist? That has metaphysical and epistemological connotations, and we've let a great deal of weight on the ethical question, though.
Yeah,
well, back to the base, metaphysics.
Yeah, well, actually, that's the thing. Like I say, and because I have a question in mind, I can't say with 100% certainty either. But like I say, I would definitely prefer, for me personally, like I say, and I would never suggest or pretend that I should tell anyone else how to think. I just do my thing and offer my own opinion, and you just respond in kind. And anyone else that's watching this video, that's up to you. But for me, like I say, I've because I like I say, I've seen the dogma of religion, I've seen the dogma of statism, and the fact that absent because I haven't seen any area where these atheists per se, right? I mean, other than yourself, a very, very tiny few people, there are not many people that reject God as a construct, not just from the creator, because that's the other thing with the concept of a creator. It creates a sense of humility as well, because that's the thing I haven't really touched on as much, is it gives us, if you have a sense of humility enough that there's something greater than yourself, it at least keeps you questioning and willing to question, because you don't think you're the end all be all. You know, land-based people, like human beings that think they're greater than now, or think that God speaks directly to them, or are part of government, which, yes, I repeat myself, right? They believe they are the authority.
Okay, you're not a metaphysical dictator, of course. Yeah, your thoughts are your own, and you're not going to necessarily proselytize them into everybody's ears who's not interested in hearing them, and let alone passing laws. I understand that, of course.
Right. But for me, the concept of God as a creator, and the fact that I exist today and you exist, and so many things are unexplainable by just, like I say, and it's not like I'm someone that hasn't understood the evolutionary theory. I fully understand the evolutionary theory, and I agree, like I say, to a substantial degree to most of the areas of knowledge in regards to the evolutionary theory. But I also understand that there is no, like, even the evolutionary theorists can say that, no, once we get back to a certain point, yeah, we just don't know. And like I say, in the absence of knowledge, I get it. And like, I would never, if it was a scientific undertaking, I wouldn't say, well, let's just fall in line with just going along with that there is a creator. But if I remove that as an area in my mind as a potential of existing, then I may never ever get to the bottom of any scientific knowledge or endeavor. Like, if you're a person, like I say, I love using the example of the Matrix. If you're trying to figure out why is this happening, if you don't have the concept or the belief or even the potential belief that, you know, maybe there is some intelligent design that's going on outside of what I know in my own tangible objective universe, then you may never get to the answer, because you're leaving out an area. This is the problem with focusing too much, right? So just like a telescope or a microscope, once you focus too narrowly into one particular area of intellectual or scientific knowledge, then you're going to leave out a large, substantial portion that might give you the answers that you need. Just like I say, just like nebulas, Galileo, when they were trying to do the Ptolemaic system, and people like Galileo had to say, hey, look, I observed actually, nope, we're not the center of the universe. There's actually this thing that's called the sun. I know we call it a star, but it's just called the sun. And look, we revolve around it instead. So if it wasn't for people that are willing to look back at things from that macro perspective, that big picture, which were people like Galileo, they were unwilling to just centralize and focus their attention in a narrow field of view. They were willing to think about things, like I say, in a macro picture. So to me, that's the very fundamental reason why I can't reject the concept of having a creator. And like I say, that's even just from the scientific aspect, but the sheer fact that I do have profound love for people, I do have morality, I do have compassion, I do have a sense of ethics, and I do feel that there is something much greater than me and everyone that surrounds me. That tells me that why would I even have that understanding? Because it's not because I haven't been willing or capable of thinking outside the realm of the metaphysical world or fictional constructs. I'm very much capable of that. But like I say, even a lot of people with very scientific objective minds think that, geez, I can't throw out the baby with the bathwater quite yet, because there still might be something there. And I just, like I say, I don't want to get rid of that until, like I say, just like you don't want to get rid of the believing that there's no such thing as God because someone needs to prove it exists. I don't want to get rid of the idea that God does exist until someone has conclusively proven that it doesn't. I think that's really, at the end of the day, and that's probably the best part actually to start to wind up this debate, is you at least are humble and you have enough humility to acknowledge you can't prove that there is no such thing as God, nor would I ever suggest that you should, right? Why would I want to try to force you into trying to prove something that if I'm the one that's creating that concept, how can you prove something that I'm trying to conjure up or create? But at least leave
like, I had a dream last night.
Hang on.
That I was on an ocean and making love to a beautiful woman. You can't prove that I didn't. Like, yeah. So yeah. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah, no worries, man, no worries. But that's what I'm saying, because there is no way to err on either side of this equation and be completely conclusive. All I really care about is, like I say, well, in the moral sense of it, like I say, if I got to pick under the current paradigm that we live on, like I say, if we're talking post-status era, like if we get past the point where people believe that the state is now their authority, their moral authority, man, Victor, trust me, we'll have an even better conversation. But under the current paradigm where people have rejected the concept of an abstract authority, which is, like I say, an ideal or God, whatever you want to call it, right? But now humans have gone, put that to the wayside, and now have placed their faith and their authority in other very, very, very provable, fallible, corrupt, and unethical human beings. So to me, like I say, I'm not going to say that I can only prove, or I can prove with 100% clarity or with 100% proof that God exists as far as the moral side of it. But if I have to choose one or the other until there's an area of our mind or the area of the intellectual endeavors that's taken place where we can remove both of those as far as abstraction, come up with a whole new concept as far as how we deal with each other morality, like I say, more scientific based. And I think that's going to happen. But in the absence of that, like I say, I'm still going to push back and at least get people thinking, just don't rest and rely on human beings to tell you where your morality and ethics must come from. Because once again, we're all fallible. So if you're relying on human beings to tell you that, right? Maybe not. Except for the ones that, like I say, the one area I will say is when the human beings, like I say, that if they can put forth and present a narrative where they're objective, observable understanding as far as morality and ethics are universalized. So that's like I say, your Ayn Rands and your Stephen Molyneux, people that are trying to use the intellectual vigor and philosophical thinking to get us to break free than the paradigms of the old as far as the construct of a moral authority. Those people, like I say, listen to them, listen to what they got to say, and try to build and expand upon your own current knowledge, whether it comes based on religion or just your observable understanding of, like, if I treat this person good, because most of us, even without any religion, can see if you treat someone reasonable, most of the times they'll treat you reasonable back. But because there are those exceptions to the rule, that's why we need something that's universalized. Until we figured out to make that like a fully human endeavor and we're all on board, then like I say, at least leave one tiny area of your mind that keeps that macro picture in perspective, where we might need an external moral authority. And even as a creator, even like I say, even if you're someone that wants to be a scientist, you know, a lot of the science that you'll be based and ground upon on how you do things will be based on a lot of the objective realities that are subsequent to scientific thought and dialogue. But there's a lot of things that you'll never get to, like the people that are testing like string theory or black holes, or there are a lot of things, like I say, they'll never maybe ever get to the answers that they need or they desire unless they keep this concept that there is something like, hey, look, they say there's even possible or potential for external or multiple universes. Well, if you're willing to accept, and that's what the scientific universe or the scientific field is willing to do, is say that, hey, there might even be multiple universes that coincide and exist simultaneously. Well, if you're willing to keep that as a construct because you have a scientific and a questioning mind, well, all I'm saying is just don't reject the fact that there might be some greater design or creator that brought us to where we are today, and why we're even trying to argue about this stuff today with all this modern advancements in technology. Just don't reject everything completely and entirely like Nietzsche did. That's all I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but as an explicit atheist, or as Molyneux himself would say, strong atheism versus weak atheism, I have come to the conclusion that such a being cannot possibly exist based on what I understand from reality. Any more then I can that I would reject the possibility of a square circle. I place the concept of God as a supernatural being, not speaking metaphorically. Might be something to be said about that.
Yeah.
But in the world of tangible facts, though, I reject outright the idea of God, given the supernatural explanation of this being that's been offered to me. I deem as impossible, and I don't have to wait for evidence. I don't have to suspend my judgment to know that the square circle does not exist, and a supernatural being that is a floating abstraction, separate and distinct from the natural tangible universe, of however we understand that. If that's said to be something that that does not tell us what God is, it only tells us what God is not. He's not limited. He's not finite. He's not this. He's not that. All of those, or that he's love. You know, you hear that.
Are you automatically assuming God's gender?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's just it just goes to show you, or even as an it, you know, I have no explanation. Like, for example, like taking a look at this, I know we should wrap up soon, but you know,
hey, actually, before we do, Victor, because we got lots of people in the chat here. I just
is anybody asking questions? I don't know. We've been ignoring them.
Yeah, sorry, and I didn't mean to do that because I didn't realize that there were going to be people, because this was real short. I didn't even have any chance to let anyone know really that this was going to happen. But yeah, no, tie up, finish what you're going to say, and if you want, maybe we can reference a few questions in there. Actually, while you're talking, I'm going to see if I can't find a couple questions there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, basically, like if God is to be distinguished from human beings or intangible, inanimate matter like rocks, like it's apparently it's some kind of floating abstraction. It's a floating consciousness. It wills, it loves, it creates. So we have to ask, anything that does that would either be like a sentient human being, or the lower life form. So we have to ask the question: is God alive? And then we have to ask when the theist says that God is alive, does it mean that God is alive in the same sense that of natural organisms? If so, God must be a material entity who will eventually die. When God is said to be wise or to possess knowledge, is that the conceptual knowledge of which human beings are familiar? If God is incapable of error and acquires this knowledge only through mental effort, it sounds very finite and limited. So all these characteristics that are superimposed on this fanciful being that we've concocted in our heads is omnipotent, omnipresent. These are qualities without limitations or finiteness, and everything that we understand about the universe and our fellow human beings is necessarily finite. We see that people die. We see that everything that exists can only is ruled by the law of identity. It can only do so much in just that. A dog barks; it does not sprout wings and flies off. Acorns don't grow into theologians. They grow into trees under normal circumstances. Everything is what it is, and only that. It's finite, determinate, and identifiable. But God is emptied of all of these considerations. It's just left out as a hollow, floating abstraction that cannot tie back down to the tangible, knowable universe. And you realize, of course, that human beings have a tremendous imagination. We can concoct a lot of bullshit that has nothing to do with reality. We can create a Walt Disney metaphysics in our head. We can do all these type of things. And my suggestion is just to clear the cognitive landscape, is to move beyond. Human beings need to move beyond this prehistoric Bronze Age idea of super authority, the CEO of the universe controlling and things like that. And since you've been speaking a lot about Molyneux and Rand, they're precisely the people who have done that. So they see that the religious ethics have failed because they're trying to ground it onto a false metaphysics, and it's failed miserably as far as I'm concerned. With maybe some offshoot beneficial effects that might have been there anyway if people were consistently rational. But their system of ethics is something to steer away, to clear the path away from a supernatural explanation of ethics. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, I agree. It's just that I think the only thing that really we disagree on is the fact that they're, like I say, it's just what they're attributing to. That's really, I think, what you, at the end of the day, what we're, the only thing we truly disagree on is where people are attributing, where their moralities and ethics are derived from, right? So Ayn Rand and Stephen Molyneux are basically saying that they're constructs of their own, derived from their own mind. And Ayn Rand has even stated specifically and outright that it was thanks to basically one man. Aristotle was the underpinnings of her philosophy. But at the same time, as far as for the intellectual and the philosophical vigor of her thought, I definitely say that Aristotle was definitely at the core of that. But it's still the construct of an ideal, because that's what even Aristotle was trying to do, was trying to construct an ideal and universalize something that's relating to morals and ethics. And like I say, to me, it's just a matter of description. And because the language is to the point where people believe that the minute you use the term God, it has this instinctive meaning. And like I say, because of television, radio, movies,
yeah, of course,
they get it. It's automatically implanted in all of our brains that this God is like I said, it's something. But like if I say science instead of God, people look, okay, well, yeah, they don't get up in arms if I say science, but science is the exact same thing to me as far as God, except as far as understanding the physical world. So science can explain the physical world easily because this is steel, right? This is plastic. And we can figure it through science how these things are done through, like I say, all the formulations, equations. But morality, it's not in the tangible physical world. So like I say, whether you use your terminology objectivism, which is still a striving for an ideal, objective philosophy and Ayn Rand, and like I say, I just as much as you, well, no, maybe not as much as you. I know you've listened to Ayn Rand a long time, probably even before me, but trust me, anything that even remotely resembles anything that has to do with Ayn Rand, I'm very much, to me, that's like I have an eargasm listening to fucking Ayn Rand. She's a beautiful, amazing mind genius. So, but to me, when I listen to her, she's still talking about, to me, it's just that I understand that she don't call her objective philosophy ground on an ideal. She don't call it God, but it's still an ideal. Her philosophy is very much entrenched in an ideal and based and ground upon a particular kind of ethics. And actually, the beautiful thing about her ethics is it's very much conducive with observable realities of the human experience, right? People have tried to misconstrue it. That's the people that used religion for a lot of nefarious reasons in the past. They completely misconstrue the actual genuine human experience and how that plays out. Ayn Rand was actually, I think, much more conducive and much wiser than most religious teachers in the past to understand, actually, this is how humans work, right? And you don't get to trick that, right? You don't get to manipulate that, while not in any way that's going to be conducive for human flourishment and human coexistence or peace. No, you have to understand human beings as they are, as a being, and then just create a morality and an ethics that's based and grounded upon an ideal, which to me, like I say, it's still that ideal, whether you call it objectivism, whether you call it UPB, or whether you want to call it God in the moral sense, in the morality sense, not the creator sense, but in the morality sense. I don't even really care. Like I say, I don't even care if we get rid of the terminology and stop using that as God, right? At some point in time in the future, I think that will probably have to. I
have a very good idea of where you're coming from. Most definitely. It's not like I haven't heard you. Like I understand what I understand your arguments.
Gotcha.
What if does somebody have a question or some?
Oh yeah, actually, well, let me just real quick there, because I was trying to scroll through them, but there's quite a few. But I just wanted to say this because this Rhonda Godwin, awesome, thanks. She's very nice. Molyneux and Rand could have learned some things from the NB. Hey, thanks. No, but I was finished with Rand years ago and wavering Molyneux. He takes us on the twilight zone. I don't know why she would say that. No, actually, don't reject anything that these people say. These are people that are actually helping. Actually, I have Molyneux and Ayn Rand to thank actually tremendously for my ability to even think in the way I do. So please never, Rhonda, don't ever reject anyone else just because you might not.
Well, somebody might have something to say in regards to the topic.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, Victor.
Trashing Molyneux.
Yeah, go for it.
No. I'm asking if there's somebody there that has something to ask.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what was down here a little further? This CG Industrial, they comment on my videos from time to time. What in the name of God makes you religious people so damn blind? So, I don't know if this CG Industrial was referring to someone in the chat per se, or if he or she. I don't know, CG Industrial, so I don't know here, but or Zin C. But anyways,
non-binary.
I'm not blind. I don't know who you reference there, CG, but I'm not blind. I'm always my mind is always questioning and open to learn and understand things.
There's going to be people who are going to take their shots at me. Don't worry.
Oh, no, I know, but I'm just trying to go through them here and hopefully find something. Hopefully that maybe you can answer here. He has a lot of, but both in the Bible. But I mean, the fact that they were talking about Ayn Rand and Molyneux, do you want to even go more onto that, Victor? Because like I say, I know you understand like the objective philosophy, and while you've been friends with Stefan for quite a few years, I know that. So if you even want to expand upon, like I say, anything you can do to help promote to people and expand on not just going towards just pure dogma as far as that and philosophical teachings or underpinnings, whatever, like I say, to me, the best thing you can do is just get people thinking about these issues critically.
Sure.
Let's see about who's.
If there's anything beyond like the standard YouTube kind of like shoot from the hip, take a slap down kind of commentary that we find, if somebody has an intelligible.
Yeah, I'm trying to find some. Actually, it seems a lot of the comments are just people kind of commenting back and forth with each other. Okay, without my belief in the creator, I would have killed most of you by now. Whoa, what the what? Okay, come on. First of all, this lie detector, LYE detector. I don't know, whoever you are in my feed. Yeah, don't what kind of stuff is that? Like that's just plain nonsense. Don't get on here saying it, without my belief in the creator, I would have killed. What the? You're not doing much of a good job for arguing for the creator.
That's a compelling argument.
Holy sheesh.
Okay.
And you can stick your morals where the sun don't shine. Damn. Lie detector seems to be pissed off at the world today for some reason, I guess. Molly did not say that people from the third world have different constructs like. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. Let me see here. Wait, Gato's here. Gato Villano. He's a guy that follows my stuff. He's a really smart guy, actually. However, science cannot prove or disprove the concept of God because science only deals with empirical facts of the natural world. Well, that is kind of true, right? But then it kind of goes to what you were saying as well, Victor, is you can't be asked to prove a negative or prove something that someone else derived in their own mind. So I understand you're completely bang on there, which is why people that have that, like even myself, I would never try to suggest that here. I'm like, when I said that my argument as far as the creator, because as we know, there's a reason why they're both based on theory, right? The evolution. I would never even try to place you in the realm that here, let me just put this onus on Victor, right? Here, Victor, can you please, one human being, can you just please explain things that are actually happening before anything even happened as far as the observable universe? Come on, Victor, you should be able to explain that, right? What the fuck?
Yeah, can you disprove the Bennett idea of God that he has in his head? Huh? Can you?
Like that just doesn't make any sense, which is why, to me, like I say, these kind of conversations, they should never be, especially when you're talking about something like God versus atheism, is don't look at them as if we're just trying to beat each other over the head or play like a hockey game and see who comes out on the other side winning. In reality, I think both me and Victor are just trying to figure out what's the grounding, what's the basis for how we think about these things in the macro aspect or in the philosophical or in the even the objective way. How will we understand? I don't know, like I say, which is why I don't want to reject anything entirely, but I definitely will the things that are more conducive with being more objective and universality, which is, like I say, science is easy. Morality, not so much. Hopefully we get that point, but we'll never get that point. There's one thing I do know for certain is we're never going to get that point if you just have a bunch of religious dogmatists or a bunch of atheists that just want to run to their perspective corners and not talk and converse with each other. The only way we're ever going to get to any point in time in the future where we can understand where each other is coming from and where we can find some common ground and figure out what's more conducive, what is consistent, because I do believe we will get there. If there's one thing I've noticed through all of human history is, or at least from what I've understood as far as what I've studied, and it's been quite a profound amount as far as modern history going all the way back for hundreds of years, is we will get there eventually. It's just that it's hard. You make a couple steps forward, you take a step back. But at the very least, if we all are putting into intellectual vigor, being honest and concise with our language, that's one thing that anyone that's watched this video today, me and Victor never tried to misrepresent what each other said. I never tried to, one up or use a word he said and misinterpret it, throw a straw man argument against the guy, because then we would have completely lost the entire point of our conversation. At the very least, like I say, Victor is still, I have no doubt in my mind, Victor's still going to be an atheist today. And I'm still going to have this kind of understanding and believe that there's a greater thing that's bigger than me, a creator, that's why we come to exist. But at the end of the day, as long as we learn to treat each other with respect and dignity, how we get to that point, hey, to me, it doesn't even really matter. If you got to just go towards just read Ayn Rand and learn about objective philosophy, or maybe if you're someone that wants to listen to Stefan Molyneux, or you're an Aristotelian, right? To me, or a religious person that believes in the modern Christian God or something. However, or even I don't know I don't know enough about Islam, folks, or Judaism, so I can't really speak to those religions. So I kind of only talk about the things I understand. But anyone, like I say, as long as you have the intellectual honesty that you're willing to have these kind of discussions with people and at least listen to what each other's got to say, because that's how we've ever advanced our knowledge, is listening to each other. And at the end of the day, if we can listen to each other and respect each other for our sovereignty, treat each other as individuals and respect each other as such, does it really matter at the end of the day if Victor believes everything I believe and I believe everything Victor believes? I don't really think it does, but I think we can both benefit each other by constantly challenging each other's intellect and what's our preconceived notions. And I think that'll benefit everyone.
Yeah, very good. And I've enjoyed this conversation, and maybe we should wrap it up now without stretching the bandwidth of people's attention spans.
Yeah.
And does and return to it, or have some other conversation in the near future.
Yeah, for sure, Victor. And like I say, I'm very glad that you put out the way your positions in such a manner, because like I say, I would never pretend even for 5 minutes to think that I should know how you should think. I'm glad that you push back against this. Actually, like I say, I've always respected people that are willing to challenge my own intellect and challenge my own dogmas, because it's the only thing that's ever broken me out of them. And they're not easy, folks. It's never easy to have your preconceived dogmas beat the shit out of you. But you know what? I'm a better man. I'm a better man as a consequence, as a result of people constantly challenge me. And I hope the people that I put forth, hopefully Victor will maybe think about things, maybe even some a little bit different, just by having this little bit of conversation and dialogue. Like I say, not like I'm trying to change Victor from being who he is. I want Victor to be who he is. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that we're not all just a bunch of NPCs that are repeating and regurgitating the same thing all over time. What a boring world we would live in if that was the case. So thanks, Victor, for having that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just one final thing here is just to say that they like a lot of people, they accuse me of being closed-minded. You're so closed-minded. You're just so set in your views. You don't listen to anybody. The fact of the matter is that back in the day, I voted. I believed in government. The government had a function. I believed in God. I heard the arguments and I went elsewhere. I think that I did a complete intellectual overhaul. How is it that I have a closed mind? And the acquisitions of closed mind is coming from people who might be in their 50s who haven't changed their mind on anything in the last 30 years, right? So, but I'm closed-minded, you see.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't believe that for a minute, Victor. You're obviously not a closed-minded person. The fact that we're having this conversation today in such a manner kind of proves that to me. And thank you for, like I say, always challenging me and giving me food for thought. I'm always going to be willing to listen to people that are doing that, because, like I say, there's the only thing that's ever broken me out of my prior dogmas was people that are willing to challenge me. And if, like I say, if you're watching this video today, at the very least, like I say, you don't have to walk away and say, well, it's Bennett won or Victor won. That's because in reality, I don't think it's a win-lose situation.
It is not a zero-sum game. Like,
no.
if it could be, in fact, the person who won the argument, whatever, hasn't really won anything, because if the other has been provided with something to think about, and it has a new appreciation to approaching a subject, or to question what he's just taken as a basic assumption, you know, that person is in far better position, is much more the winner than the person who just had such a rigorous case that they nailed the other person or whatever. Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game, a debate, you know. So
yeah.
But anyway, let's wrap her up.
Right on. Yeah, I don't think there's any losers, just nothing but a whole lot of winners. You and I and anyone else that's going to watch this video going forward. So thanks everyone to watching this, because like I say, at the very least, whether you agree or disagree, no matter what position you take, or even if you don't take either position, completely disagree with us either, or both of us, at the very least, like I say, you've had some food for thought. And really, at the end of the day, that's what we're both trying to offer, because that's what's going to help us advance our intellect as far as how we should treat each other going forward. So thanks for everyone to watch this video and this debate, and we'll see you next time. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.
Thanks, Bennett. I'm going to be